My name is Jim Zub. I'm one of the writers of Lower Your Sights, an anthology raising money for an amazing cause, and you are listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Jim Zub about the Lower Your Sights graphic novel anthology. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Jim is a writer, artist, and art instructor based in Toronto, Ontario. He's worked for many publishing, movie, and video game companies, including Marvel, DC Comics, Disney, Capcom, Hasbro, Cartoon Network, and Bandai Namco. When he's not busy as a freelance comic writer, Jim is a program coordinator for Seneca College's award-winning animation program. His many projects have included Wayward Adventures, No Way Home, Champions, Dungeons & Dragons, Conan, and a whole lot more. His most current work, along with artist Richard Pace, is a contribution to the Lower Your Sights graphic novel anthology. Lower Your Sights from Mad Cave Studios is a graphic novel anthology that focuses on the consequences of war, the peace/relief effort, and mental health. In addition to tales from today's hottest creators, the collection includes art pieces and write-ups from numerous Ukrainian illustrators. All proceeds are being donated to the Ukrainian-based Voices of Children to provide psychological and psychosocial support to children affected by war. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Jim Zub about the Lower Your Sights graphic novel anthology. So, Jim Zub, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
No problem. My absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Before we get started, though, I want to ask you, what's on your reading table? What are you reading now?
I'm on a deep dive going back through Robert E. Howard Conan stories. I'm relaunching Conan the Barbarian at Titan in the new year. Nice. And so I am kind of filling up my reading list with the source material again. I've read them all before, but it's always nice to reinvigorate, my brain on that stuff and go back to the source and, really try and connect myself with that kind of pulp source material as much as I can as I'm writing the first couple issues of the brand new series.
Nice. That sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's fun. It's neat because it's like, I've read them before, but when you're reading for research, it's different from reading for fun. You really try and just kind of, I've got a little notepad beside my table as I'm reading, and I'm just taking specific notes of things that jump out at me or particular kind of verbiage or just the sort of stuff that just reminders for myself to really, just get that momentum going.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, we're here talking about your latest contribution to the new anthology book, Lower Your Sights from Simon & Schuster. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the story and what inspired you to create it.
I had been talking earlier in the year on social media about my background. So my pen name is Jim Zub, but my full name is Zubkovich, which is Ukrainian. And so my family's background is Ukrainian. And I had mentioned that, I had this weird kind of feeling because of the conflict that was happening, overseas and everything over there and with old kind of family in the old world there. I have not been there, but my family came from Ukraine to Canada. And so I feel this kinship, obviously, and, watching people's lives kind of in turmoil, it was just something that had been on my mind. And after talking about that on social media over a few posts, Chaz Pangburn reached out to me from Mad Cave Studios, and he was the person who was kind of the lead editor putting together that anthology, Lower Your Sights. And so he asked if I'd be interested in putting together a story for it. He was trying to get as many creatives across the comic book field, but the fact that I also had a Ukrainian background meant, it was even more kind of poignant. And so he asked me if I'd be interested. I said, sure. And then we put together the creative team, Richard Pace and I working together and just putting together that short story to try and encompass some of those thoughts. And both Richard and I donated our time for, an amazing cause. So
sure. Yeah. Is there a theme to the story that you can give us without giving away too much of it?
Sure. So my story is called Homestead, and it's essentially kind of that weird feeling that someone, a lot of the Ukrainian people, they've had to kind of give up whatever life they had and become, soldiers and to defend their homeland. And so this idea of whatever mundane things you were doing before, whatever you thought your life was about and how normal it could be, now you've been thrust into this situation completely out of your control, and your survival and your future is, in jeopardy. And so it's this person, it's sort of the inner thoughts of someone who's trying to ratify, who they were just a few weeks ago with who they are now, and how they look at the world around them and the destruction that has taken place, and their hopes that they can return to, the mundane, because that's what we're all kind of hoping, is that this, conflict can end, and that the Ukrainians are able to have their country and keep their borders and stay safe, obviously.
Right. Reading a bit about it online, it says the anthology focuses on the consequences of war, peace and relief, and mental health. I'm wondering how your story addresses one or all of those concerns.
I think it's really in that mental health and the idea of peace. Like, the tough thing is you don't want to ignore the idea of the conflict, but you also don't want to glorify it. Like, this isn't a, rah, rah, let's go get them kind of thing. It's more of a, look, we're resolved to fight for, our own safety and for the defense of our country, and the fears that we have that we won't be there on the other side of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, the anthology is going towards a charity called Voices of Children. And that's really the focal point, is this idea of, the psychological, the ability to assist and evacuate Ukrainian children from this conflict. And that was something that felt like a really good cause to help support, and something that I believe a lot in, obviously.
Well, what do you hope readers will come away with after reading your story?
Just the idea, the understanding that the Ukrainian people have been thrust into this. I know there's a lot of, on social media in particular, there's a lot of this framing of the conflict right now in terms of like Ukraine is winning, or Russia is losing, or people are being pushed back and forth. And it's very easy to kind of sensationalize those things in social media. But no matter what's happening, lives are being taken and lives are being destroyed on all sides of this thing. And so, I just want to see a good resolution, as good as it can get, as soon as it can get. When we started working on this back in April, we had hoped that this would be something that would be short-lived, and now it's still ongoing. And, as much as it looks positive right now, the longer this goes on, the more damage that is being done, and the harder it's going to be to rebuild, no matter how well it goes on any side of it,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I understand. Now, you mentioned you're working with, or you've worked with artist Richard Pace, a fellow Canadian. How did you two meet up for this effort? And maybe you could talk a bit about the collaboration process, too.
Yeah, Richard and I have been long friends. I've seen him at a lot of conventions over the years, and we have a lot of kind of shared, fandom over things like Conan the Barbarian and board games and role-playing games and all kinds of stuff like that. So he's come over to my house multiple times. We've hung out a bunch, and we've always talked about working together on something. And even just before this project kind of happened, we had been chatting on social media back and forth about, man, we got to hang out more. Man, we got to do something in the future. And then when Chaz reached out about this anthology, I was like, well, what a perfect kind of springboard. Let's, are you interested in this? I know that Richard has been really good about raising money for all kinds of different charities. He's done a ton of different artwork for different charity causes in Canada and abroad. And so I knew that he would be amenable to that kind of a thing, and asked him if he would be down for it, whether just the line art or something like that. And he fully illustrated it. So he did the line art and the colors on it. And then Chaz, our editor, actually did the lettering on it himself. And so, yeah, it's got a really nice little tight, production team on this particular story. And it just turned out wonderful.
Nice. Well, glad to hear it worked out. That's for sure.
Yeah, I kept the script pretty stripped down. I sent Richard a bunch of different kind of interviews and articles that I had been reading about the, people in Ukraine and their kind of attitude on it, and the kind of self-defense force that's been pulled together in some of these regions, to give him some visuals to go off of. And then I had the narration all written out and some broad descriptions of visuals, and then really wanted to leave it open to him to sort of interpret it, so he could put as much of himself into it as possible.
Oh, very good. Very good. Yeah. Now, I read that you're going to be attending New York Comic Con in October. I'm wondering, what are you most looking forward to at that show?
New York's one of the big ones. I was at San Diego this year, and it was wonderful to see people for the first time in over 2 years. And I have no doubt it's going to be that way in New York as well. See some of my editors, see readers, see my friends, and that social kind of connection, reestablishing that feeling, as much as we've been doing all this stuff online and in some ways, keeping those tethers strong with, remote calls and things like that. There's nothing quite like being in person and being able to see friends and hang out and commiserate and get caught up. And so I'm just looking forward to kind of keeping that momentum going. And being able to promote the new projects I've got on the go, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. You got a lot, that's for sure. But while you're there at New York Comic Con, I also read you're going to be on a panel called Art and Its Power to Heal. I wonder if you could, without getting into too much detail, what will you be talking about on that panel?
Well, that's a panel that's been specifically put together for the Lower Your Sights anthology. So I think there's going to be a bunch of creators who are going to be talking about their contributions and this idea that, marking a period in time with projects like this and creating art in and around these sorts of causes, I think is a really powerful tool for us to be able to communicate our fears and our hopes and things like that. And also for people to be able to show their support in a way that I think can kind of galvanize and hopefully motivate others to want to create and also to want to donate. As much as it's nice to get a physical object of a book or something like this anthology, hopefully it also gets you thinking on the other side about ways that you can, contribute or the types of things that you can do, whether it's monetary or otherwise, to support good causes like this.
There's many, many different books I can refer to that artists come together, gather their thoughts and do what they can to address certain horrific situations. I remember 9/11, and there was a ton of books that came out after that. I remember there was the Las Vegas shooting. So it is a healing tool, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I've contributed to a couple anthologies. I had a story in Love is Love that came out, after the Pulse shooting and things like that. And again, I think it's a way for us to try and frame our thoughts or just sort of mark that moment in time and just sort of be like, hey, we our shared humanity in the face of these things.
Right. Now, you mentioned before you've got a lot of projects on the go. I also read that you and Troy Little have a new Rick and Morty book coming up. What other books do you got going on?
Yeah, Troy and I are doing a new Rick and Morty crossover series. We've done 2 of the Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons over the past few years. And so we're taking a bit of a swerve, but still crossing things up. We're doing Rick and Morty versus Cthulhu, which I'm really, really excited about. Kind of a staple of the nerd genre. And there's a lot of kind of meta humor in and around that. Lovecraft is so intrinsic to kind of the nerdly arts. And we're digging into that kind of existential horror. The way I kind of described it in the pitch was like, it's nihilism versus narcissism. It's this really over the top sarcastic take on media and on crossovers as a whole. Troy is going to the wall with it. He's just drawing some of the best pages I've ever seen from him. We're having an absolute ball working on it.
Nice.
In addition to that, I've got 2 projects going at Marvel right now. The new Thunderbolts miniseries, which is the way I kind of pitched that was almost Hawkeye and Friends, Avengers by way of Ted Lasso. Like it's very hard on your sleeve kind of comedy, action in the mighty Marvel manner. And we're having a ton of fun with that. That's going to be running through to the end of the year. I've also got a series I'm doing with fellow Canadian Ray Fox. We're doing a series of 5 interconnected stories, all called Murder World. And that is, of course, Marvel's infamous kind of game show of death that we're bringing back in a big way and kind of reinvigorating for a modern audience.
So very good.
Very excited about that. There's going to be all sorts of awesome twists and turns. And I think each issue is going to surprise people in terms of the stuff that we unleash in that series. So
it sounds like you're going to be busy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a lot on the go. In addition to that, I'm doing Unbreakable Red Sonja at Dynamite. So between that and Conan, I am well entrenched in the Hyborian Age in all the best ways possible.
That's for sure.
Lots of cool stuff through to the end of the year and into the new year.
Yeah, it sounds like you're super busy. So where do you recommend people go to find out about all your various projects online and through social media?
Well, the good thing is everything is easy to find. You just go to jimzub.com. So just JIMZUB.com. Or for those Americans, I guess it's ZUB. But, We know what should be said. Anyway,
that's right.
Yeah, jimzub.com, and everything's on there. So it's got upcoming solicits, interviews, links to buy my books, all sorts of tutorials on how to make comics as well. So I go in depth about how I pitch my stories, how I write a comic, how I work with artists, and all that kind of stuff as well. So if people are interested in a peek behind the curtain or interested in making their own books, that's also a pretty good spot to check out.
Sounds good. Well, Jim, those are all the questions I have. Is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
If you get a chance, please check out Lower Your Sights. Everyone that worked on the book is really, really proud of their contributions. I can't wait to get a physical copy in my hands at New York Comic Con and sign a bunch for people. Really, really proud to be a small part of a great, collection like this.
Thanks to Jim for taking time to chat with me. You can discover more about Jim on Twitter at Jim Zub, and on Instagram at Jim_Zub, and online at jimzub.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts, and please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website, and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel, and hit the notification button. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2022.